we are not a British colony.
Come on,
you must know that.
Tell him again. Right. Tell him again.
We are not a British colony.
Tell him again.
British. We don't hate you. We only love our country. Blair, keep your England and let me keep my Zimbabwe. Mr. Chairman, having said that, may I say, people must always come first in any process of sustainable development. And let our Africans come first in the development of Africa, not as puppets, not as beggars, but as a sovereign people. We equally reject attempts to prescribe new rights that are contrary to our values, norms, traditions, and beliefs. We are not gays. Cooperation and respect for each other will advance the cause of human rights worldwide. Confrontation, vilification, and double standards will not. Mr. President, self-determination and independence are intrinsic and fundamental rights that should be enjoyed by all peoples everywhere without distinction. We are deeply concerned by the continued denial of this basic right to the Sahrawi people. We urge the United Nations to expeditiously finalize what must be done to conclude the decolonization of the Western Sahara. We don't hate you. We only love our country. We love ourselves better than we love you. What has happened to Britain? Is it their education? Is it a tradition? Huh? They have grown small in mind, small intellect, ideology gone. That wisdom which the likes of Churchill had, where is it? You don't see it at all. You can't see it in people now with gay habits. Shame on them. I pity the one lady I admire, the Queen, that she is in these circumstances. I'm sure, but damn deep she must be grown. The loss of values in Britain. They've gone to the dogs. No respect. Countries don't respect Britain anymore. Rule Britannia, Britannia rule the world. Which world? Gone.
Do you consider white Zimbabweans to be Zimbabweans?
Those who are naturalized and have citizenship, yes.
Those who've been living there for years and years and years?
But historically.
Right.
Historically,
the people who've
they have a debt.
Contributing to farming, historically they have a debt to pay.
Yes, the land, they occupied the land illegally. They seized the land from our people.
Look.
And therefore, the process of reform, land reform, involved their having to hand over the land. We agreed upon this with the British.
They're citizens, aren't they? And isn't this farming disaster contributing to
citizens by colonization? Seizing land from the original people, indigenous people of the country.
But how did that all go so wrong?
That?
How did that all go so wrong? Because when you came in, it was about reconciliation.
No, they knew about it. They knew we had this program of land acquisition and land reform. They knew about it.
But what about the blacks?
And the British
then?
knew about it.
Why you talk of regime change in Zimbabwe? One of us. By what connection, sir? Do you hear me? Ancestral connection? And who were these ancestors? Can we know? No, Zimbabwe is for for the Zimbabweans. And only Zimbabweans can determine who shall rule them and who shall not. Whether there is a situation here of political disorder, of lawlessness, violation of the rule of law, violation of human rights, lack of democracy, our neighbors would know that better than the British government, less still the American administration. It is our land, ancestral land, our sacred land, never an extension of Britain.
The UK is trying to teach us how to run our country. Naturally, we resist that. We do not accept. We are not a British colony any longer. We are not the only country, developing country, with problems. There are many countries with problems. Zimbabwe is far better than the average developing country. You come to Zimbabwe and you will see we are not a collapsing economy. We have difficulties at the moment, but certainly we have a strong asset base and we will not collapse. But when we have difficulties, you see, Britain has no right at all to try and suggest to the rest of the world that we are a failure. Nor have they a right to try and suggest to us what we should do. We are not an extension of Britain, we have said. And so this is the main area of difference between them and ourselves. If there is any country we should now be considered for sanctions, is Britain for interfering in the domestic affairs of Zimbabwe.
Okay, just one more question. Britain also wanted to raise this issue during this summit. Do you think it's appropriate to discuss this?
Well, the British have no standards apparently to guide them, and if they do, they would be misfiring. And since I'm here, I will take care of them.
But we are not a British colony. Come on, you must know that.
Tell him again. Right. Tell him again.
We are not a British colony.
Tell him again.
At that point, I was wrestled away by Zimbabwean and Egyptian security men. But the man who still calls himself president of Zimbabwe had plenty more that he wanted to say.
What have the British to do with Zimbabwe? Who are you? You bloody idiots. Your Excellencies, we must examine why 10 years after Rio, the poor remain very much with us, poorer and far more exposed and vulnerable than ever before. Our children suffer from malnutrition, hunger, and diseases, compounded now by the deadly HIV/AIDS pandemic. The betrayal of the collective agenda we set ourselves at Rio is a compelling manifestation of bad global governance, lack of real political will by the North, and a total absence of a just rule of law in international affairs. But they would want the poor should be able to use their sovereignty to fight poverty and preserve their heritage in their corner of the earth without interference. That is why we in Zimbabwe understand only too well that sustainable development is not possible without agrarian reforms that acknowledge in our case that land comes first before all else, and that all else grows from and off the land. This is the one asset that not only defines the Zimbabwean personality and demarcates sovereignty, but also an asset that has a direct bearing on the fortunes of the poor and prospects for their immediate empowerment and sustainable development. Indeed, ours is an agrarian economy, an imperative that renders the issue of access to land paramount. In our situation, Mr. President, This fundamental question has pitted the black majority, who are the right holders and therefore primary stakeholders to our land, against an obdurate and internationally well-connected racial minority, largely of British descent, and brought in and sustained by British colonialism, now being supported and manipulated by the Blair government. Let no one who is negative want to spoil what we are doing for ourselves in order to unite Africa. We belong to this continent. We don't mind having and bearing sanctions banning us from Europe. We are not Europeans. We have not asked for any inch of Europe, or any square inch of that territory. So, Blair, keep your England and let me keep my Zimbabwe. Mr. Chairman, having said that, may I say, people must always come first in any process of sustainable development. And let our Africans come first in the development of Africa, not as puppets, not as beggars, but as a sovereign people.
And now you get some people still saying, because we are white and you're black, we can't give you the honor of equality in the Security Council. Nonsense. That should stop. Mr. Mugabe, just tell them for the last time, just as a message that you have heard for the last time from here, that there should be real equality in the Security Council. We can't just be coming to the General Assembly to make empty, hollow speeches and go back home. Nobody takes care of all the concerns we express. No. And anyway, the headquarters is actually of the United Nations is misplaced. Where do you have most of the people? You have 1.2 million billion, 1.2 million people in India, 1.3 in China, and Africa, we are getting to nearly 1 billion also. Now put us together, just these three, and then put those with the white faces and pink noses, put them together as against us. How many are they, even man to a man? And do we allow that group should continue to harass us even in our independent countries? Regime change, Mugabe should not be there, we want someone else. The creator was telling me the other day that he had been told that, oh no, your party, Chama Mapinduzi, had been in power for too long. You must now allow another party also to take over. Is that democracy? And that was coming from Europe. Tell them to shut their mouths.